This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this evening's meeting of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Our president, Alita, had another engagement, so I'm filling in for her. My name is Mary Arakaki, and I'm the secretary for VSH. So I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight in the rainy weather and spending some time with us. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about our organization and the mission of VSH. The Vegetarian Society of Hawaii is a not-for-profit volunteer organization founded in 1990 to promote health, animal rights, and the protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education. We are very proud to say that we are one of the largest local vegetarian societies in the country, with more than 1,500 members. Now, I think that deserves an applause. That shows the dedication of our group.
With the owner of a Camry license number, oops, wrong script. Okay, here we go. Before Mary speaks tonight, we have a very special announcement. Longtime board member and our mistress of ceremonies tonight, Mary Arakaki, has just become a registered dietitian. Thank you. And VSH President Alita Rutchick, along with the whole leadership, wants to publicly acknowledge all the hard work and dedication that Mary's put forth to achieve this degree. I'd like to quote a little poem that expresses this all very nicely. I hit the books and started to cram all I've learned for that final exam. Studied flashcards, read my books, don't know how many hours it took. But it all paid off, I'm proud to say, because I became an RD today. Author Mary J. Arakaki, RD. And now we'd like to present Mary with a lei, and who better to do it than Bill, her husband?
You guys know how emotional I am about stuff like this. Thank you very much.
You can continue now.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. It is my great pleasure and time to introduce our guest speaker. Tonight we have with us Dr. William Harris, who's going to present thoughts on the raw foods diet. Dr. Harris has been a vegetarian for more than 50 years and a vegan since 1963. Prior to his retirement, he was an emergency physician at Kaiser here in Honolulu, where he was also the director of the Vegetarian Lifestyle Clinic. Dr. Harris received his medical degree from the University of California at San Francisco and is the author of the Scientific Basis of Vegetarianism. He's a founding, dedicated member and director of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Harris.
Thanks a lot. I became a vegetarian in 1950 for ethical reasons. I think that it's wrong to kill animals. I became a vegan in 1964, also for ethical reasons. And I'm very concerned about the suffering of animals, but I'm even more concerned about the suffering of humans that results from eating animal food. Animal food absolutely trashes your health, and it trashes the environment, and to top it off, It trashes the ethical fabric of our society. I think it's really kind of ludicrous to imagine a good and warless world in which 7 billion animals are being killed every year for food. So, thank you. I wrote this book. I think we got a few copies on the table there. Spent a lot of time doing that. I practiced medicine until 1998, and then I retired, and I took up skydiving the next day, and this is my new unit patch. It says skydivers over 60. Grandpa jumping out of the plane in his red flannels in a rocking chair, and he's reaching back with his cane to pull his ripcord. Okay, and here we go. I jump out of a twin-engine Beech King Air up at Dillingham. It gets us up to about 14,000 feet in about 15 minutes, and I'm a trampolinist, so I like to do somersaults going out the door. That was about a quad. This is a triple with a 1.5 twist. You see the 1.5 on the end. This next one is a triple with a half twist. The guy that's really doing all the work is a cameraman. He's fallen out on his back, and he's keeping me in the frame all this way. This is amazing. Once you get in the air, it's kind of like the dreams that you've had of flying. You can do about anything you want. That was a barrel roll, and here a couple of 360 turns. You can just do them almost automatically. I'm falling through the sky at 120 miles an hour here. So, and that's Dillingham in the background. That is my parachute there. It's a ram air chute. It's a lot better than the old style round chutes where you wound up in a pile every time, but generally you'll land like a ballet dancer, although sometimes I look like Daffy Duck on skates. This is a remarkable shot. Now this cameraman was also very good. He's going to catch me in a forward 5 1/2 somersault out of that Cessna. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I kind of flubbed the dub at the end there. And that's the landing. So that's it for me in skydiving, but I'll show you one other thing, because I'm also the sponsor coach of the Hawaii High Flyers Trampoline Club at McCully Recreation Center, and that's me doing twisting triple somersaults on the trampoline. Now, this may look like it's pretty easy, but actually that is the equivalent of very vigorous long-distance running as far as oxygen uptake goes. This is my big stunt coming up. This is a back full, double full, triple twisting back triple. And that's all, folks. So now on to the lecture, pros and cons of a raw vegan diet. First of all, we ought to consult the original raw fooder, God. And basically what he's saying here is eat raw fruit, vegetables, and seeds. And I always thought that was really weird, that nobody could possibly do it. But for the past 3 months I've been doing it, and it works just great. So I'm pretty much an advocate of it. There are about 24 peer-reviewed articles on Medline. The positive reports include weight loss, better antioxidant status, it alleviates fibromyalgia, improves rheumatoid arthritis, get normal nitrogen balance, which means that you get enough protein. Alters the fecal bacterial flora favorably, decreases your cholesterol and your low-density lipoprotein. You get weight loss even with higher calorie intake. Diastolic blood pressure comes down a little bit. Serum tocopherol, that's vitamin E, and retinol increased. Serum and urinary phenol cresol dropped. That lowers the risk for colon cancer. Better fecal bacterial flora and rheumatoid arthritis. This one I really doubt. One study said that you can get B12 from nori and chlorella seaweed. Don't believe it. That's a B12 analog. Okay, the negative reports, number one is the same as the major positive report, weight loss. If you're already skinny, you may not want to go on a raw vegan diet, because I'm not sure you can keep from getting even skinnier. Amenorrhea in young women, that's not a good thing. Low vitamin B12 levels, inadequate omega-3 fatty acid intake, increased risk of dental erosion, that's usually from people that eat too much citrus fruit. lower than the RDA for iron, zinc, and niacin. Well, niacin doesn't count because you can make that stuff yourself. Few differences in biomarkers for cancer. Weight loss is one of the major advantages, and one of the easy ways to keep track of your weight is body mass index. It's defined to be kilograms and weight divided by height in meters squared. And if you're way up on the fat end of the scale here, your morbidity index is pretty high. People who are overweight are at risk for just about everything. But if you go too far on the skinny side, your morbidity goes back up. So this is a J-shaped morbidity curve, and you want to try to stay in the flat area over here, which is between a body mass of 18 and a body mass of 25. Now, those were the peer-reviewed items. There are 810 raw vegan URLs. So there's just a whole bunch of websites out there. This seems to be the new fad in this country. The one that I would refer everyone to when you start, go to the skeptical one. His name is Tom Billings, and he was a true believer raw fooder for about 15 years, and it didn't work for him. So he has become sort of a lacto-vegetarian now, and he's writing some very good skeptical reports about what can go wrong on a raw vegan diet, and you should never jump into stuff without checking out both sides of the issues. I've got a little squib up here on my website at VegSource.com about raw versus cooked. And then there are, well, among the 810 URLs, I found these two websites that I think are pretty good, SunFoodNet and RawVegan.com. According to this study done by some Germans and reported in 1997 at a nutrition convention in Montreal, raw vegans get about 67.8% of calories from fruit, 23.3% from vegetables, 1.4% from nuts, dairy products. They don't belong in there. They're not part of a vegan diet, so the investigators didn't know the definition of vegan. Cereal products you can't eat raw either, so they don't belong in there. And then other, I don't know what that is. The raw fooders talk a whole lot about living food. So we ought to define what living food is. Both plant and animal life share some characteristics: growth, metabolism, movement, reproduction, response to stimuli. However, animals, in addition, have a nervous system and they have consciousness. And I believe that that is where the ethical concerns of vegetarians arise. If you kill an animal, you're not just knocking off the growth, metabolism, movement, reproduction, etc. You're killing a conscious creature. Whereas if you kill and eat a plant, there's nobody home. So I don't really think there's an ethical problem doing that. Raw food arguments. We're the only animals on the planet that cook food. Well, that's true enough, we are. But we're also the only ones that build spaceships and go to the moon. Raw fruits and vegetables are vibrant and alive. Yeah, that's kind of true, but it's a little gushy. They contain the sun's energy. Well, so does all the oil in Iraq. As they have not been cooked, their flavor is still full and rich. Yeah, I agree with that. They really do taste good. On a mostly raw diet, you can make a meal in less than 10 minutes out of a few ingredients. That's absolutely true. And furthermore, you don't have to clean the grease out of the drain afterwards. The general guideline is that one must eat at least 75% raw foods to be a raw foodist. Well, now this was news to me because by that criterion, I've been a raw food vegan for about 30 years. The foods that can be eaten raw are more nutritious than the ones that have to be cooked. Now, everybody listen carefully, because this is the place where they really got it right. The foods that you can eat raw have enormously higher nutrient values than the foods that you have to have cooked. We have 6 nutrients here: protein, calcium, iron, riboflavin, vitamin A, and zinc. I made up this graph from Nutritionist 4 data and made the slide with Quattro Pro. This is the RDA for all of these things. This arrow represents how much of these 6 nutrients you should be getting, and this little thing down here is the RDA itself. The actual amount of protein you need is represented by this little narrow strip of reddish brown protein. The calcium is this sort of cream-colored stuff here, and the iron is black and so forth. Well, you can see that the foods that you can eat raw, like spinach, and V4 juice, which is this V8 juice that's had a couple of vegetables left out, and romaine lettuce, which is a really heavy hitter, and alfalfa sprouts, and 96 vegetables averaged in 100-gram increments, have really high excesses of the RDA. They're way past the RDA, whereas potato, brown rice, winter wheat, pasta, and 18 breads, which are always cooked, hardly make it to the RDA. So that's the main reason that I find for being on a raw diet. This is the other big reason, and that is this stuff. You can stop eating this stuff once you get on a raw vegan diet. And the reason is because you'll find in the natural flavors of the foods that you can eat raw very delicious things that you never noticed before. Now, I can't eat a potato raw. If you cook a potato, I've got to put something salty on it or something that's got some flavor, because the potato doesn't have it. But with raw food, you don't need anything because the food itself takes care of it. Here's some more raw food arguments. Healing through fasting. I think that's a pretty good idea. Everybody has the capacity to go without food for at least several days, and probably most of us several weeks. And we never get acquainted with that ability because we have the idea in our society that you have to have 3 square meals every day or you will be dead the next day. And it's not true. Healing with enemas, I don't think so. You can stick a tube in and you can wash out your colon with a gallon of water, and it'll be spick and span for about 10 minutes, and then the ileocecal valve, which connects your small intestine with your large intestine, will open up and dump another load of what we politely call chyme into your colon, and it'll be dirty again. Consume only organically grown produce. I agree with that. The other stuff is full of herbicides, fertilizers, and bad chemicals. Before humans started killing and eating dead animal carcass, we ate fruit, leaves, nuts, and berries. And I think that's probably true, but you probably have to go back 3 or 4 million years to find that time, because we were the descendants of large arboreal primates who were vegetarians living in Central Africa. The tree lines dried up 4 million years ago, and all those animals had to come down on the plains, and they started scrounging for anything they could find to eat. First of all, they ate carrion. They found dead animals lying around and ate them, and later they became very efficient hunters. This type of diet even gives you a competitive edge over people that eat lifeless food. Well, if that's true, I'd like to know where all the raw food vegan athletes are. I haven't seen many of them winning the Olympics lately. Use structured water. Big question about this one. Anybody hear of structured water before? Okay, water is a very unique molecule. The bonding angle between the 2 blue hydrogens and the red oxygen is 109 degrees, and for that reason the negative charge on the oxygen sticks out and attracts the positive charge on the hydrogen of an adjacent water molecule. And so for a short period of time, the water can take on this cubic structure. But the problem is that all these hydrogen bonds are shifting at the rate of 1 trillion times per second, so the structure is reforming constantly. Water is an extraordinarily fickle molecule, and it'll take up with any other water molecule that it sees in the vicinity. So while there may be structure in water, when it's in proximity to some complex molecule like this hemoglobin molecule, you can imagine that there's a little structure between these blue water molecules here, and it's maintained by the hemoglobin molecule. But as soon as you pour the water out of the container that it's in, it's going to take on the structure of your gastrointestinal tract. So it's a losing proposition to pay money for that stuff. Enzymes. Now, they also say a lot about enzymes, and this is another point where I disagree with them. In general, the act of heating food over 116 degrees destroys enzymes in food. Yes, that's true. Enzymes are denatured by heat. Then they say all cooked food is devoid of enzymes, and the cooking of food changes the molecular structure and makes it toxic. Sometimes it does, but it also makes it more digestible, and that's why we cook this stuff in the first place. The digestibility of potato goes up about 100% when you cook it. Raw potato is almost indigestible. Enzymes are known to be the life force and energy of food. Well, that's leftover 19th century metaphysics. There are various ways of processing food. Most of the ones on this left side will kill the food in the sense that after you're finished heating the food up, all those enzymes will be denatured, and all the cell membranes will be broken down also, for that matter, and you won't be able to tissue culture the stuff afterwards. However, if you were to use any of these methods, freezing, freeze-drying, evaporation, so forth, theoretically, you could tissue culture the food when you're finished doing it. In practicality, all of the frozen food companies blanch the food before they freeze it because they don't want those enzymes to survive. If they do survive, they keep on working on the food substrate, and that winds up with an off flavor, so they can't sell it. Well, this is a grand champ of overstatement. Enzymes present in raw foods take priority over secreted digestive enzymes. This book has about 400 references, none of them available, and none of them more recent than 1970, and a lot of them come from the 19th century. There's one supporting journal article. I spent a lot of time trying to find some scientific verification of that enzyme concept, and this is the only thing I could find. Prochaska suggests that the enzymes in the food may synergize in the sense they work together with your own digestive enzymes to increase the digestibility of the food, and I can buy that. That might be true. However, there are 25 gastrointestinal enzymes, at least. There's probably more since this book was written. And they're basically broken down into three categories. There are amylases to digest starch and sugars, and proteases to digest protein, and lipases to digest fats. 25 of them. And furthermore, there are 12 gastrointestinal hormones that give the marching orders to those enzymes at various parts of the GI tract, from the fundus of the stomach down to the colon. Now, if it were true that enzymes in food are more important than your own enzymes, why would an efficient God or a parsimonious evolution have bothered producing all of these complicated chemicals to digest your food? And my final statement is that the food may be alive when it goes in your mouth, in the sense that you could tissue culture it, but it's certainly going to be dead by the time it gets halfway through your gastrointestinal tract, because that's the reason for eating food in the first place. You're trying to break live food down into its most primal particles. You want the stuff to be broken down as much as possible, and so it won't be alive, but probably by the time it gets out of your stomach. You have to digest your food, and don't depend on your food to digest itself. This is how enzymes work, as a schematic of an enzyme. Enzymes are little biochemicals that allow life to proceed, and they're extraordinarily important. Nothing would work on the planet if it were not for enzymes. The enzymes make it possible for biochemical transactions to take place at low enough temperatures so that the rest of the organism is not killed. You could conduct most of the biochemical reactions in a retort in a Bunsen burner, but you'd kill everything in the retort. So the enzymes allow these transactions to go on at temperatures that are compatible with life. And this shows how it works. This is a little food substrate. It takes up with an enzyme. The enzyme moves it over here and splits it in two. This is a globular protein. It could be an enzyme, and it's simply a sequence of amino acids, and they're broken down by the proteases in the stomach. So enzymes are just not going to make it through the stomach. I can be persuaded otherwise if somebody can give me some literature that really supports that idea. Well, among the fraudulent pyramid schemes you won't have to deal with on a raw food diet is this one from the USDA, which says that you should only eat fats, oils, and sweets sparingly. You shouldn't eat them at all. They're junk. And on a raw vegan diet, of course, they're not in the diet. You won't be using any of this stuff. This is dairy, and that's not vegan. And you won't be eating the poultry, the fish, the meat, or the eggs. You might be eating the peanuts, though, but I don't know what they're doing up there with the meat and the poultry. What you will be eating a lot of is raw vegetables, raw fruits. You won't be eating any of this stuff either because you have to cook it. This is what the average American really eats: 39% dairy products, 13% meat and chicken, 13% flour, bread, cereal, vegetables 26.5%, and fresh fruit 8%. So we've kind of turned the USDA pyramid on its nose. When I was running the vegetarian lifestyle clinic, I amputated the top of that pyramid, just threw it away, and came up with food guide trapezoid. And I moved the grains off the bottom because I didn't think even then that they belonged at the bottom of the pyramid, which is supposed to represent the major part of what you're eating. And right now I would lop off this part of the trapezoid and fill it up with raw nuts, seeds, and avocados. I'm going to look around, see if any vegetarians faint when I say avocado. We've got a fat phobia in our vegetarian society. You're not supposed to eat avocados. Well, here's some more fraudulent stuff you won't have to deal with. This is Promise ultra fat-free, non-fat margarine. You look on the nutrition facts on the back, and it turns out there are 5 calories in a serving. All 5 calories come from fat. So the Promise non-fat margarine is what? 100% fat. The FDA is doing a little fandango with the food industry, and they let them get away with this flim-flam. It's ridiculous. You won't have to look at things like this either. This is a chemical form. Amazing, right? If you look carefully, there's some food in there, but it might take the rest of the night to find it. Things that you can depend on in processed food: salt and sugar, monosodium glutamate, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. Even the FDA has caught on to the trouble that causes. When you hydrogenate vegetable oil, you get a mixture of trans and cis fats, and animals only use cis fats. The trans fats raise your serum cholesterol, and they have an even worse problem that nobody has even looked at yet, and that is the trans fats get into your cell membranes. Your cell membranes are supposed to be made out of cis fats, and nobody knows what the effect of having trans fats in the cell membranes are. This is some more stuff you would never touch on a raw vegan diet. There is one thing in this picture that is worth consuming. I think we have a door prize for the person that can spot it. V8, right. You could live on V8 juice for the rest of your life if you put a teaspoon of Red Star nutritional yeast in it, because you'd have a completely balanced food. But the kids are not eating this stuff. They're taking the soda pop, and it's a national scandal that these machines are allowed in schools. They ought to be taken out. This is some more stuff from one of the websites. This guy says he's a raw vegan, but he's hyping not only books and video discs, but honey and bee pollen. Well, honey is not vegan by definition. And honey comes from little flying insects called bees, and they're members of the animal kingdom. So honey is not part of a vegan diet, and it's not raw either, because the bee sucks the nectar up from the flower, runs it past its salivary glands, puts it in its honey stomach, digests the stuff a little bit, flies back to the hive, regurgitates the contents of the honey stomach into a hive bee, who then sucks it up past her salivary glands and puts it in her honey stomach. So honey is twice regurgitated and twice partially digested material from bees. The honey people would like you to believe that they got a magical health food, and that, oh, my mouse is dying. Okay, resuscitate the mouse. That's first order business. Now here's honey contrasted with sugar, oranges, watermelons, and peaches, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Honey it's barely better than sugar, and it's no match for bananas, oranges, watermelon, and peaches. As far as bee pollen goes, This is a prominent skeptic on the subject of bee pollen. It consists of 40% plant carbohydrate, 5% plant fat, 5% plant protein. The rest is fungus, bacteria, insect body parts, mites, and bee fecal material. So if you think bee fecal material is raw, be my guest, but I wouldn't touch this stuff with a 10-foot pole. This is the stuff that you get to eat on a raw vegan diet. You can eat as much of any of these things as you want. You don't have to apologize to anybody for eating avocados or raw nuts. They're very nutritious. And of course, the grand champs for nutrition are the leafy green vegetables. So these are the things that you can eat on a raw vegan diet. And you don't have to put anything on them, because if you mix them up a little bit, they're just perfect. And they fit in very well with the 5-a-day program of the Hawaii Department of Health. And this is their logo. They want you to eat pigmented fruits and vegetables, because that's where all the cancer-preventing phytonutrients are. And the only thing that I would change in this logo is that I'd put a 1 in front of this 5. As I said, weight loss is one of the major things that you can expect on a raw vegan diet. And yes, this is Sandra Bullock, and somebody morphed her. Sent her to me on the internet. I hope she won't object to my using her, but anyway. The people who are overweight like to use various reasons for being overweight, like there's something wrong with their metabolism or their hormones or their heredity or their thyroid, and there probably is. But the bottom line is that if you absorb more calories from your food than you need, you're going to gain about a pound of fat for each extra 3,500 calories. This unfortunate lady checked out at the age of 34 at a weight of 1,600 pounds. And I have no doubt that she had some hormonal and metabolic problems. But if you looked at what she was eating, which was cereal, pizzas, and soda pop, there's no doubt about how she got that way. Here's the other end of the extreme. This is what happens to you when you don't eat at all. These are Nigerian kids starving in the midst of one of their many famines. I think these are probably concentration camp prisoners from the Second World War. These are Union soldiers in Andersonville prison in Georgia during the Civil War, and the same thing happened to them. So the experience of every famine and every starvation cycle that's ever come along is that you lose weight. You're going to lose a lot of weight if there's no food. And it doesn't matter what your hormones and your thyroid and your genes are telling you, you're going to wind up looking like this. Well, you don't want to look like that, but you do want to get down to the point where your weight is under control. And the reason a raw vegan diet works to do that is because the stomach has a capacity of about 1 liter of food. After the 1 liter has been achieved, the stomach starts sending little signals from its stretch receptors up to your brain saying that that's enough. We got enough food down here. And about that time, the nutrition committee that's living up in your brain and checking out to make sure that all of the vitamins and minerals are there through a very complicated system of feedback mechanisms and receptors is going to say, yeah, well, we got enough of that stuff too. And the calorie committee comes in and says, wait a minute, you guys, we're still short on calories. So the first 2 committees say, well, you're outnumbered 2 to 1, so you're going to have to take the calories out of your fat stores. And that's how you lose about a pound a week probably on any kind of a vegan diet, but particularly on a raw vegan diet. Here's some of my websites. If you want to download the entire USDA database, you can go here. It's a 14 megabyte zipped Excel spreadsheet. Also have comments about the raw cooked diet. Got a diet exercise questionnaire here. And I got a couple of smoothies at our own Vegetarian Society website, which, by the way, is looking pretty sharp these days. You ought to go there, take a look at it. We've got a new webmaster named Rob Reisenwitz who's doing a great job for us. This is my exercise questionnaire. It calculates your body mass index for you. If your weight is 155 pounds and your height is 72, your body mass index is instantly calculated at 21.1. If anybody knows where there's some dihydrogen oxide, I need some. Anybody got some water? Well, that would be a big help. So 21.1 is normal. It's within 18.4 to 25. Oh, great. Thank you. Bless you. Bless you, my child. I'll pay for the antibiotics when you use that again. Now, if your weight was 255, it would turn out your body mass index is about 36, and you'd be in the overweight 2 category. But the nice thing about doing this is all you need to figure out your body mass index is a scale and a tape measure. It's super simple. It won't work. It won't give you accurate results if you're the present California governor, because he's a weightlifter. And he's going to have a lot more weight, but he's not fat. He's just got a lot of muscle. We hope he's got some brains, too. Got a couple of smoothies up here. You can download these at the VSH.org. But I wanted to show you that you meet all of the nutrient requirements on these smoothies. If you get enough calories from these smoothies, you're going to barely get enough protein. You get enough vitamin A and then some. You get enough zinc, dietary fiber, and because I put a little bit of Red Star nutritional yeast in this, you also get vitamin B12. But you can see you're over the wall as far as vitamin C. This is the RDA arrow, and you meet the RDA for everything. Now here's an even more nutritious smoothie. This is my vegetable smoothie. Both of these smoothies use a lot of sunflower seeds and unhulled sesame seeds. Unhulled sesame seeds contain 1,100 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams, so they're a great source of calcium. But as you can see, if you eat all your day's calories from this vegetable smoothie, which I'm not saying you should, but you would get more than enough protein, vitamin B12, and all these other things. So these are pretty healthy. And while I use them as smoothies, it's only because I'm too lazy to chew. I think maybe the raw fooders would say this is not really a raw food recipe because you run it through a blender, and specifically a Vitamix blender. I need to tell you a little about a Vitamix blender. It's the only one that'll do a decent job on these smoothies. I've tried Waring's and Osterizers over the years, and they just can't cut the mustard. You want something that will turn out a smoothie that basically has the consistency of a milkshake. And the reason I think it's important, if you are not heavy into chewing, that you use a blender is because blenderizing food greatly increases the surface area of the food that is going to be exposed to your digestive enzymes. Now let's start with a macadamia nut. Say it's about a centimeter in diameter. It's roughly spherical. If you break it into 1,000 analogous spherical particles, it will have 10 times as much surface area as the original macadamia nut did. If you break it into 1,000,000 particles, it will have 100 times as much surface area, 1,000,000,000, and it goes up to 1,000 times as much surface area. And this is really very important if you want to improve the ability of your digestive enzymes to reach the food substrate. In general, the cube root of the number of particles is the rate at which the surface area increases. Now here's a lady who's really living dangerously. She would probably be ostracized from the Vegetarian Society because she has had the effrontery to stuff an avocado with sunflower seeds. Now the avocados are already off limit because they're about 80% fat. The sunflowers are about 50% fat. So what's she doing? What's she thinking of? This can't possibly be good food. But this is the nutrient analysis of her raw avocado salad. If you get enough of the calories, you're going to get more than enough calcium, protein, zinc. She put some Red Star yeast in her recipe. And so this super fat recipe, 69% calories from fat, nevertheless makes the RDA for everything. So it's good stuff. I want to discuss how we ever got into the habit of demonizing fat as if it was a major enemy of humanity. You may remember that Colin Campbell, how many people heard Colin Campbell when he was here? He's a really good lecturer. He's an epidemiologist at Cornell. And one of his buddies, Ken Carroll, back in the 60s, started doing graphs like this showing fat consumption versus breast cancer mortality. And you can see, this is a really shaggy slide, but take my word for it. These are countries, and the more fat they consume, the higher the rate of breast cancer. Here's one showing fat consumption and colon cancer mortality. You can't see that one very well either. Fat consumption and prostate cancer mortality. You can see this one fairly well. Well, I did a few of these myself using FAO data, and I found that, yeah, animal fat and breast cancer are good buddies. This is a regression line, and the statistical analysis shows that the correlation coefficient is 0.76, which is pretty high. The p-value is less than 0.01, which is usually taken to be evidence that it's not a statistical fluke, that these points all seem to be lining up. But then I did the graph over using animal calories rather than animal fat. And this was animal fat. The R was 0.76. The R value went up to 0.82. It was 0.76, but when you do it against animal calories, it's even a higher correlation coefficient. So as Colin mentioned, he thought maybe we'd shot the wrong boar. We've been stalking fat all this time. The real villain is animal food in general and processed food in general, because animal fat consumption, as recorded by FAO, is really a marker for animal food consumption, and it's also a marker for junk food. Cell membranes are made out of fat. Okay, this is a lipid bilayer of a cell. The little fatty acid chains, these are the yellow doodads here, and the blue things are phosphoryl groups on the ends of those fatty acids. Phosphoryls are soluble in the water on the outside of the cell and on the inside also, and then you have little reinforcing molecules of cholesterol here. Now, you don't have to eat cholesterol because your body manufactures 500 milligrams of the stuff every day, but you do have a need for some fat. You've got to replenish these fatty acids when they break down and wear out. And if you're not eating any fat, if you're trying to make it on a 10% protein, 10% fat, 80% carbohydrate diet, you're just not going to have it. You need two essential fats. You need linoleic acid, which is the first of the omega-6 fatty acids, 18 carbons in the link, and the first double bond comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's got two double bonds, so it's an 18-2 omega-6 fatty acid. This is the other one, and this is the one that we're really on the shorts for. This alpha-linolenic acid. It's the first of the omega-3 fatty acids, 1, 2, 3, and then it's got 3 double bonds. You got to get enough of that stuff. And one of the reasons that we have trouble getting enough is that all agriculture is based on grain, and grain has got tons of this stuff, linoleic acid, but it's got ZIP, alpha-linolenic acid. And everybody's eating grains and grain-fed animals, and so they just don't get enough alpha-linolenic acid. Alpha-linolenic acid is only synthesized in the chloroplasts of green plants, so eat your spinach, dear. There are a couple other essential fatty acids, or not essential fatty acids, but important fatty acids that are made from ALA. I'll call it ALA from now on. Eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, the famous ingredient in fish oil. The other one is docosahexaenoic acid, DHA, and that may be a problem for vegans. You have to make your own, and under ordinary circumstances, if you got enough ALA in your diet, you can make enough EPA and DHA, but if you have any doubt about it, you can now get supplements of DHA from algal sources. It still smells like fish, but it comes from algae rather than from fish. This is where we probably went wrong. This is where the agricultural revolution started 12,000 years ago in the Middle East, and they started raising wheat and barley, cattle, pigs, goat, and sheep around this area that we are now trying to get the oil from. And we always have thought, well, the egg revolution is really what made it for us. It's really important as a best thing we ever did. This guy says it's the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Physiologist at UCLA Medical School, speaking in the Discover magazine, May 1987, agriculture was bad for health. First hunter-gatherers enjoyed a varied diet, while early farmers obtained most of their food from one or a few starchy crops. The farmers gained cheap calories at the cost of poor nutrition. I agree with that. And then the other thing he said was that because it produced a population explosion, people wound up crowded into cities and they started passing their diseases around. And by the 15th century AD, we had things like the Black Plague in Europe that were the result of overpopulation. This is what the Ag Revolution really did. It increased our human population from 5 million in 12,000 BC to 80 million 4,000 years later. So it caused a 16-fold population explosion, and because it was based on grains, the idea has come down to us that that's what we ought to be eating. The only thing that grains really accomplish is they're cheap and they'll support a large population on a suboptimal diet. The population explosion is still going on, by the way. Population doubling time is 60 years, and by my calculation, if we continue at that rate in 1,194 years, every living human will get exactly 1 square meter of earth to stand on, and that will include the 2/3 of the population that will be treading water out in the middle of the ocean. This is the thing that makes grain so important. You can store it forever. You couldn't put fruits and vegetables in this silo. They'd be gone in 3 days, but you can put tons of grains into this. There's another guy that believed that grains ought to be the be-all and end-all of human nutrition. George Ohzawa, also known as Yukikazu Sakurazawa, died in 1966. He founded the philosophy of Macrobiotics, which keeps getting confused with us in the literature. The Macrobiotics people have racked up a really impressive skein of pediatric disasters. Kids that wind up with vitamin B12 deficiencies, rickets, osteoporosis, iron deficiency. And the nutritionists don't know that there's a difference between macrobiotics and vegetarianism, so they say, well, vegetarianism is bad news. The macrobiotic philosophy is based on the theory of yin and yang. I thought that yin-yang was going to turn out to be some sort of a metaphysical thing. It looks like this, but actually it was a result of really good observational science done by ancient Chinese, who measured the length of a shadow cast by an 8-foot pole at the same time every day, 365 days as the Earth went around the sun, and they wound up with this pattern. So it didn't start off as metaphysics, it started off as good science. But it's metaphysics now. And among the things you're not supposed to eat, according to the yin-yang theory, is all these fruits, because they're too yin. This is a classification of things that are yin. Cold is yin. Females are yin. I would never have associated cold and female together. I generally think of females as being warm and nurturing. But anyway, you got to avoid things that are yin in this philosophy, which means that you also don't want to drink much water. I don't know how you avoid electrons, and I also don't know how you would have known about electrons 3,000 years ago in China, because they didn't even start talking about electrons till about the middle of the 19th century. And also they didn't know anything about potassium and sodium. Potassium is classed as yin, and you want to avoid that stuff, according to this. You want to make sure you get enough sodium. Here's some quotes. The whole category of fruit is a very yin one. No fruit should be eaten by those who are ill. Avoid the most yin vegetables, potatoes, tomatoes, and eggplant. Well, they can take the potatoes and eggplant, but they better not mess with my tomatoes. If possible, take only a total of 8 ounces of liquid per day. I've never heard of anybody saying that. That's goofy, especially in Hawaii. You need to load yourself with liquid, or you're going to wind up with kidney stones out here. Okay, here's his disciple. Good quality oil is essential to life. Well, when did that happen? Can you imagine hunter-gatherers sitting around squashing the oil out of seeds? No, they're going to eat the seeds and the nuts that they find. They're not going to turn them into oil. As far as I can tell, oil never came into the human diet until about 3500 BC, when the Egyptians started using olive oil for food and linseed oil for paint. And they would have been better off doing it just the other way, because linseed oil and flaxseed oil are the same thing. Salt is essential to life and has been a universal food commodity since ancient times. That's a quote. Absolutely incorrect. You do not need crystalline salt in your diet. This is the reason you don't need it. This is a hormone made from cholesterol called aldosterone, and it selectively reabsorbs sodium from the distal tubule of your kidney in exchange for potassium. So you don't need crystalline salt in your diet. The National Academy of Sciences is not too sharp about sodium. They set the recommended dietary allowance at 1,100 milligrams. I tried to find out where they got that. And all I could figure out was they went out and surveyed Americans and found out that was about how much they ate. If they were going to play guessing games, it would have made a lot better sense to put the RDA at about 500 milligrams, because doctors have been putting patients on 500 milligram sodium diets for 100 years with no adverse side effects, except that the patients don't like it. As you can see from these various food categories, the only ones that would leave you short of sodium would be fruit, nuts, and brown rice. As it happens, the ultimate goal of a macrobiotic diet was to live on nothing but brown rice, and one lady died in 1965 as a result of following that diet. Here's some of the risks from excess salt: cancer of the stomach, fluid retention, hypertension, left ventricular hypertrophy, osteoporosis, increases the risk for asthma, renal disease, and stroke. You have to maintain a very precise balance between the sodium on the outside of your cells and the potassium on the inside. Turns out they both are about 140 millimoles per liter. And you've got a little gadget in your cell membranes that does this. This is a sodium pump, a very schematic drawing of a sodium pump. The little blue dots here are potassium atoms or ions, and the red ones are sodium. This pump collects the potassium ions and it pitches them to the inside where they belong, and then it picks up some sodium ions and dumps them on the outside. Now, the reason you don't want to have salt in your diet, at least as you get elderly, is that you will start to retain sodium. You won't be able to get it out of your cells, and things will start swelling up in places where you don't want swelling to occur, like your legs, and will also raise your blood pressure. Because what happens, there are about anywhere from 800,000 to 30 million of these things in each cell membrane of your body. And I think that as you get older, those cell membranes either downregulate or they become less efficient. They don't do the job that they should do, so as you get older, salt becomes more of a problem. You can get away with anything when you're young. You can live at McDonald's and swiggle all down with Coke, but when you get older, you got to start taking care of yourself. Another macrobiotic quote: whole cereal grains contain a balance of protein, carbs, fat, and vitamins ideally suited for human consumption. And that's why stage 7, the highest stage of the macrobiotic diet, was nothing but cereals. Nothing but cereals. It was never vegetarian because it always included fish, even down here. And when you got to the top rung, it was nothing but grains. Well, that's why the lady died on that diet, because grains are seriously deficient. Here's the RDA. Here are everything to the right of the RDA arrow you get enough of. Everything to the left of the RDA arrow you don't get enough of. There are major nutrients missing over there: riboflavin, folate, calcium, vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, vitamin A, vitamin B12, and vitamin C. Those things are all deficient in grains. So why are we making grains a centerpiece of our diet? Well, because it's cheap. You can get your 2,200 calories for $1.21, according to Nutritionist 4. This is brown rice. It has about the same list of deficiencies. If you were going to go for just one kind of food, fruit would be better. It's not deficient in as many things. It's missing calcium, protein, zinc, and vitamin B12. But look how expensive it is, $18.42 for 2,200 calories. You'd be better off eating nothing but vegetables because the only thing they're short in is vitamin B12. But they're also expensive. And as I pointed out before, the thing that really has run our agricultural system is cheap food that can supply a large population. And that's how we got hung up on grains. You may have to pay a little more for a raw vegan diet, but you'll save doctor bills in the long run. Alpha-linolenic acid, the best source for that stuff is nuts and seeds. You're not making the RDA, assuming you need about 2.4 grams a day of alpha-linolenic acid. You don't make it with any of these other things. You particularly don't make it with grains, beans, fruit, stuff down here. Before I leave you, I want to make sure that everybody has heard of vitamin B12, because if you are on a vegan diet, you have to have a dependable source of vitamin B12. This is an extraordinarily complicated vitamin. No other vitamin looks anything like this. It's got a little cobalt molecule here sitting up in this pyrrole ring, and then it's got flapdoodle hanging all over it. I could take the rest of the night explaining what that stuff is. It's got the highest molecular weight of any essential micronutrient. It's twice as heavy as beta-carotene, which is the next heaviest. Beta-carotene is a relatively simple looking molecule. It looks like a dumbbell. So that's vitamin B12, and that's what you have to have. Make sure you have it on a vegan diet. If you don't, you're using yourself as a guinea pig, and I use myself as a guinea pig quite often, but if you don't eat vitamin B12, you're going to be playing Russian roulette with 5 chambers loaded. Thanks very much. That's it.
Let's give a very warm appreciation to Dr. Harris. Thank you. Dr. Harris, we are so fortunate that you share your knowledge with us and your years of experience. So thank you all for coming out this evening. We very much appreciate it. See our literature table and hand out those flyers so we can get a good group to our next talk. Thank you very much. Have a great month.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344, or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.